Emily stood still, her mind racing as she waited for the woman's response. The silence between them seemed to stretch on forever, her heart thudding in her chest. She had asked a question that, in her wildest dreams, she never expected to get an answer to. The woman's pale face and uncertain expression told her that this was no ordinary mistake. This was something much more complicated. "You're mistaken," the woman said after a long pause, her voice cold and distant. "I don't know what you're talking about." Emily's grip tightened around the tray she was holding, her knuckles turning white. Her eyes never left the woman's face. There was something there, some flicker of recognition that the woman was trying hard to hide. Emily felt it in her gut, the gnawing certainty that this wasn't a coincidence. "No," Emily replied, her voice steady but firm. "That's my father. I know it is. I've seen that photo 1,000 times. Why is it in your wallet?" The woman's eyes darted around, as though searching for an escape. But there was nowhere to run. The restaurant was busy, the usual hum of conversation and clinking glasses now feeling distant and muted. Emily's world had narrowed down to this moment, to the woman sitting across from her, holding her father's picture like some kind of secret. "I don't know what you think you saw," the woman began, her tone defensive, "but that's not something I can explain." Emily leaned in slightly, not out of intimidation, but because her curiosity was burning hotter than ever. "Please, tell me who you are," Emily said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "Tell me why you have his photo. It's all I have left of him." The woman hesitated, her eyes shifting away as though the weight of the question was too much to bear. For a moment, Emily thought she might refuse to answer. But then, with a sigh, the woman looked back at her, her face softening just slightly. "I knew him," the woman said, her voice low and heavy with something Emily couldn't quite place. "I knew him a long time ago. But he's not the person you think he was." Emily felt a rush of emotion, a mix of anger, confusion, and hope all flooding her at once. This was not the answer she had been expecting. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What happened to him? Where did he go?" The woman paused again, her fingers tightening around the glass in front of her. She was clearly struggling with something, but what? "It's not my story to tell," the woman finally said, shaking her head slightly. "But I'll tell you this much. Your father wasn't just a regular man. He was involved in things you wouldn't understand." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her father had always been a mystery to her, a figure who had vanished without a trace when she was just a little girl. But hearing this woman's words, hearing her speak of him in a way that suggested something much deeper, something darker, made her feel more lost than ever. "What do you mean, involved in things?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. The woman closed her eyes for a brief moment, as though trying to gather her thoughts. "Your father was involved with people who didn't want to be found. People who would go to great lengths to stay hidden. And when he disappeared, it wasn't just by chance." Emily's heart was racing now. "What are you saying? Did they take him? Did they hurt him?" The woman's gaze flickered with a hint of sorrow, but she didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood up, slowly, her chair scraping softly against the floor. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything," the woman said, her voice cold again, like a mask had slipped over her face. "I don't know why I even brought it up." Emily reached out instinctively, but the woman had already turned to leave. "Wait," Emily called, but the woman didn't stop. She walked quickly to the exit, disappearing into the crowd of patrons. Emily stood there, frozen, her mind reeling. The words, "involved with people who didn't want to be found," echoed in her ears like a warning. What had she just heard? And why had the woman reacted so strongly when she asked about her father? She had to know more. She had to find out what had happened to him, and who this woman was. Her heart pounded as she glanced around the restaurant, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of the woman. But she was gone. Emily felt the weight of her father's disappearance settle heavily on her shoulders again. She had spent so many years wondering, searching for answers, and now, finally, she had one. A clue. A tiny, fragile thread to follow. And she wasn't going to let it slip away. She had to find out the truth, no matter where it led her. But how? Who could she turn to now? She looked at the empty chair where the woman had sat. Her father's photo still burned into her memory. She had no choice. Emily was going to have to find out the rest of the story, even if it meant stepping into a world she wasn't ready for. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stumbled into something far bigger than she could ever have imagined. The words that the woman had spoken echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the mystery surrounding her father's disappearance. Involved with people who didn't want to be found. What did that mean? Who were these people? And why had her father been part of it all? She had to know. She couldn't just leave it like this. She couldn't let her father's memory remain a mystery. Not anymore. The next day, Emily woke up with one clear thought. She was going to find out everything. She couldn't go back to her normal life, to just serving drinks and taking orders, not when she had a piece of the puzzle in her hands. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to stop until she got them. She made her way to the restaurant early, hoping to catch the woman before the lunch rush. She had no idea who she was, or what connection she had to her father, but she was determined to find out. As Emily walked into the empty restaurant, the familiar smells of fresh-baked bread and sizzling steaks filled the air. She walked past the quiet tables and toward the back, where the kitchen staff was preparing for the day. The woman wasn't there yet. Emily's heart sank, but she didn't give up. She stood by the service station, watching the staff move around, her mind racing. A few minutes passed, and just as she was about to turn and leave, the woman appeared through the kitchen door. She was in her uniform again, the same black dress and apron, her hair pulled back in the same neat ponytail. Emily's pulse quickened as she stepped forward. "Excuse me," she called out. The woman froze, her back stiffening as she heard Emily's voice. For a moment, there was silence between them, as though neither of them knew what to say next. Finally, the woman turned around, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What is it now?" she asked, her tone cold. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I need to know more," she said, her voice steady but firm. "About my father. About what you said yesterday. Please." The woman's eyes flickered with something, perhaps guilt or hesitation, before she quickly masked it with indifference. "I told you, I don't know anything more than what I've already said," she replied quickly, as though trying to dismiss the conversation. But Emily wasn't going to let her off that easily. She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving the woman's face. "You do know more," Emily said quietly, almost pleading. "I can tell. Please, just tell me what you know. I won't tell anyone. I just need to know what happened to him. What happened to my dad?" The woman's face softened for a split second, and then her eyes darkened. She sighed deeply, as though weighing the decision in her mind. "Fine," she said reluctantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you have to understand, this isn't something you can just walk away from. Once you know the truth, there's no going back." Emily's heart raced. "What do you mean?" The woman glanced around nervously before leading Emily to a quiet corner of the restaurant, far from the kitchen and the service stations. "Your father, he was part of something," she began, her voice low and cautious. "Something that most people would never even dream of. He didn't just disappear. He was taken." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Taken? What are you talking about?" The woman looked around again, making sure no one could overhear them. "There are people, powerful people, who get involved in things they shouldn't. Your father, he wasn't just a regular guy. He had a part to play in something much bigger than himself. He got in too deep, and when he tried to leave, she trailed off, her voice faltering. "They took him," Emily whispered, feeling a chill run down her spine. The woman nodded slowly, her expression grim. "Yes, and they made sure he wouldn't come back." "You think he just disappeared?" "No. He was forced into hiding. And now, they want to make sure that no one finds out the truth." Emily felt the weight of her words sink in, the shock of the revelation hitting her like a punch to the gut. Her father wasn't just missing. He was hiding, trapped in a world she couldn't even begin to understand. But why? Who were these people? And why had her father been involved with them in the first place? "I need to know more," Emily said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Who are these people? What did my father get involved in?" The woman hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering with fear, before she spoke again. "I don't have all the answers," she said softly. "But I can tell you this. Whoever your father was working for, they're dangerous. And they won't hesitate to come after you if they think you're a threat." Emily felt a surge of anger and fear wash over her. This was bigger than anything she could have imagined. But now, she had to know the truth. She couldn't stop now. "I'll take my chances," Emily said firmly, her resolve hardening. "I need to find him. I need to know where he is and what happened to him." The woman looked at her for a long moment, then sighed deeply. All right, she said quietly. I'll help you. But you need to understand, once you're involved, there's no going back. This isn't a game. These people will do anything to keep their secrets. Emily nodded, determined. She had no choice now. She was going to find her father, no matter what it took. But she had no idea just how deep this dangerous game went, or what she was about to uncover. The woman's warning echoed in Emily's mind as she walked out of the restaurant that evening, the weight of her words hanging heavily over her. Once you're involved, there's no going back. Emily wasn't sure whether that terrified her or made her more determined. She had never been one to back down from a challenge, especially when it involved her family. The truth about her father was within reach, and she wasn't going to stop now. As she stepped out into the cool New York night, she pulled her coat tightly around her. The city was buzzing with life, but for Emily, it all felt distant. She was trapped in a world she barely understood, chasing shadows and secrets that seemed to lurk just out of her reach. But now, she had a lead. The woman, whose name she still didn't know, had given her something, a clue, a thread to pull on, and Emily wasn't about to let it slip away. She had one question on her mind. Who were these people? The ones her father had gotten mixed up with. And more importantly, where was he now? The next day, Emily sat at the small desk in her apartment, her laptop open in front of her. She had no idea where to start, no idea how to untangle the web of lies and secrets that had been spun around her father's life. The woman had mentioned dangerous people, but what did that mean? Who could be dangerous enough to make her father disappear without a trace? Emily took a deep breath and began searching the internet, starting with what she knew. Her father's name. She hadn't really thought about it much before now, but as she typed it into the search bar, she realized how little she actually knew about him. There were no articles, no news stories, just a few old, dusty records from his past. A name, an old address, a record of his work. Nothing that told her where he had gone or why he had vanished. But there was one thing that caught her attention, a business venture. A company he had been involved with before he disappeared. The name was familiar, and something about it nagged at her, as if it had been right in front of her this whole time. It was called Helios International, a company focused on emerging markets and investments. The woman had mentioned something about her father being involved with people who didn't want to be found, and this company, Helios, was one of the largest, most secretive investment firms in the world. Emily clicked on the link, her heart racing. The website was sleek, professional, and completely devoid of any real information. No team members, no About Us page, just an endless list of investments and financial reports. But something stood out to her, a recent acquisition in the Middle East. It was an energy company, one that had been flagged for suspicious activity in the past. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Her father had been involved with Helios. And whatever they were doing, it wasn't just business, it was personal. But how? She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. Her father had been a man of mystery, but this was more than just a man with secrets. This was a man who had gotten in over his head. And now, Emily was paying the price. She knew she couldn't do this alone. She had to find someone who could help her understand what was really going on, someone who had access to the information she needed. Her first thought was the woman at the restaurant. She had been reluctant to help, but she had also been the one to open this door. Emily had no choice but to go back and ask her for more information. The next evening, Emily found herself back at the restaurant, this time walking straight to the back where she had met the woman the day before. She didn't want to wait around or pretend like this was just a normal shift. She needed answers. As she approached the service station, she spotted the woman, still in her black dress, serving a table. Emily hesitated for a moment, but then walked up to her, her resolve stronger than ever. "I need to talk to you," Emily said, her voice low but firm. The woman looked up, her expression wary. "I told you before, I can't help you," she said, her tone colder now. But Emily wasn't about to back down. "You're the only one who can help me," she replied. "I know you're involved in this, and I need to know everything. Please." The woman's eyes flickered for a moment, and for the briefest second, Emily saw a flash of something. Fear, maybe, or guilt. But whatever it was gone in an instant. "I told you, I'm not the one you should be asking," the woman said, her voice low. Emily wasn't listening. "You said you knew my father. You said he was involved in something. What was it? What did he do? The woman glanced around, her gaze darting nervously. I told you. I can't be involved in this, she repeated, but this time there was something different in her tone. A hesitation. A crack. I don't know what you think. You're getting yourself into. The woman said finally, lowering her voice. But these people, they don't care who you are. If they think you're a threat, they'll make you disappear, too. Emily swallowed, her throat dry. I don't care, she said. I just want the truth. The woman sighed and looked away for a moment, as if debating whether to speak or not. All right, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll tell you what I know. But you need to understand something. Once you go down this path, there's no turning back. Emily nodded. She was already too deep to turn back now. Go on, she said quietly. The woman leaned in close, her voice dropping even lower. Your father was involved with Helios International, she said. But not in the way you think. He wasn't just an investor. He was part of something much bigger, something they don't want anyone to find out about. Emily's heart raced. What do you mean? The woman looked around nervously before continuing. Helios wasn't just investing in companies. They were involved in something far more dangerous. They were funding operations in conflict zones, backing leaders who were, well, let's just say, they weren't exactly interested in human rights. Emily's mind was spinning. This was worse than she had imagined. Her father had been involved in something illegal, something that could destroy everything she knew. And now she was part of it too. Emily's heart pounded as the woman's words sank in. Her father, involved with Helios International and their operations in conflict zones? The weight of that realization crushed her, but at the same time, it ignited a fire inside her. She wasn't going to back down. She had come too far. But now, everything had changed. This was no longer just about finding her father. It was about uncovering the truth and exposing a dark world she never knew existed. She looked at the woman sitting across from her, trying to digest the gravity of what she had just learned. What kind of operations? Emily asked, her voice low but determined. The woman sighed, glancing around nervously. I can't go into too much detail, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But they weren't just funding companies. They were backing regimes, groups, anyone who could further their agenda. They were involved in covert operations all over the world, using their wealth and influence to manipulate governments and economies. Your father got mixed up in all of it. Emily's mind was racing. This was the man she had known as her father, the man who had vanished when she was just a child. She had always wondered why he left, why he had disappeared without a trace. But she never could have imagined this. So he knew what he was getting into? Emily asked, her voice trembling. He wasn't some innocent man who got caught up in something by accident. The woman shook her head slowly. Your father knew exactly what he was getting into. He was smart, and he was ambitious. Maybe too ambitious. But things changed. He wanted out. And when he tried to leave, that's when everything went wrong. Emily swallowed hard. They took him because he wanted out. The woman nodded gravely. Yes, they don't let people walk away from this kind of thing. Once you're in for life. And your father, he paid the price for trying to leave. They made sure he couldn't get away. They erased him. And now, anyone who's connected to him is at risk. Emily's blood ran cold. This was no longer just a matter of finding her father. This was a matter of survival. She had to know who was after her, who had the power to make people disappear, and what they would do to keep their secrets hidden. She couldn't do this alone. She needed help, and she needed answers, fast. What do I do now? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman stood up slowly, her expression softening just a bit. You need to be careful. These people, they have eyes everywhere. They'll be watching you. They won't let you get too close to the truth. But if you're determined to find your father, I can help. I know where to look. But you need to understand something. This is dangerous. If you follow this path, there's no turning back. Emily nodded, her heart racing. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had a purpose now, a mission that was bigger than her fear. I'm not afraid, Emily said firmly. I have to do this. I have to find him. The woman studied her for a moment, her eyes filled with something between pity and respect. All right, she said quietly. I'll help you. But we need to move fast. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to get to the truth. These people are always one step ahead. And if they think you're getting too close, they'll come after you. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. What do we do first? The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the door, checking to make sure no one was watching. "We need to get access to the records," she said, turning back to Emily. "There's a database, a private one, where all of Helios's financial transactions are kept. If we can get our hands on that, we'll have everything we need to expose them." Emily frowned. "How do we get access to something like that?" The woman looked at her, a small, knowing smile crossing her face. "Leave that to me," she said. "But we have to be careful. Helios has connections everywhere. Once we make our move, they'll know, and they'll come after us." Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm ready," she said, her voice stronger now. "Let's do this." The woman nodded, her expression serious. "All right, but you need to understand. We're not just going after your father's past. We're going after something much bigger. If we succeed, we'll bring down an empire. And if we fail—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Emily knew exactly what was at stake. There was no turning back now. She was in this for the long haul, and she would stop at nothing to find her father and bring the truth to light. But deep down, a part of her wondered if she was ready for what she might uncover. She had already stepped into a world she never imagined existed. What was waiting for her at the end of this journey? Emily's mind raced as she followed the woman down the narrow hallway of the restaurant, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space. They were about to take the first step in uncovering the truth about her father. A part of Emily was excited, her heart pounding with anticipation, but another part of her was scared. What if they were too late? What if they were walking straight into a trap? She couldn't afford to think that way, though. She had made it this far, and there was no turning back. They reached the back office, where the woman pulled out a set of keys and unlocked the door. Emily followed her inside, noting the small, cluttered office filled with paperwork, old files, and dusty shelves. "This is where it all happens," the woman said, walking to a filing cabinet at the far side of the room. She opened it slowly and began pulling out thick folders filled with documents. Helios International is very careful about what they keep hidden, but they're not perfect. There are always cracks in the system, always a way in. Emily nodded, trying to keep her composure. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This wasn't just about her father anymore. This was about exposing a web of corruption and danger that reached far beyond what she could ever have imagined. The woman handed her a folder, and Emily's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The first page was a series of financial transactions, large sums of money moving between countries, between companies, but nothing that immediately stood out. As she flipped through the pages, Emily's eyes narrowed when she saw a familiar name, her father's. The transactions were dated months before his disappearance, and they were linked to several offshore accounts. He was involved in money laundering, Emily whispered, her voice shaking with disbelief. "I don't know exactly what he was doing, but this isn't just business. He was helping them hide something." The woman nodded, her expression grim. "Yes, and if you look here," she said, pointing to a particular document, "you'll see a pattern. These payments are connected to several government officials and private investors who have ties to conflict zones. Your father wasn't just a middleman. He was facilitating deals, making sure the money flowed smoothly." Emily's stomach churned as she scanned the documents. But why would he do this? Why would he get involved with people like this? The woman shook her head. "I don't know, but I can tell you this. He got out just before things got really bad. He knew what was coming. And when he tried to leave, that's when they made him disappear." Emily closed the folder, her mind spinning. This wasn't the father she had known. He had always been distant, a figure she had never truly understood. But this was something else. He had knowingly gotten involved with dangerous people, people who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden. But why? And how could she find him now? "What now?" Emily asked, looking up at the woman. "We have what we need," the woman replied, her voice low and tense. "But we can't stay here for long. If anyone finds out what we've uncovered, it'll be over." Emily's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, over?" "Helios has eyes everywhere," the woman warned, her voice urgent. "If they think we've found something, they'll come after us. They'll make sure we never get close to the truth." Emily swallowed hard. This wasn't just a matter of finding her father. This was about survival now. She couldn't back down. She had come too far. "I don't care," Emily said firmly. "I have to know what happened to him. I need to find him, no matter what it takes." The woman studied her for a long moment before nodding. "All right, but we need to move quickly. The next step is to get to the people who know where your father is. They're the ones who can tell us the truth. Who are they? Emily asked, her voice filled with determination. I have a contact, the woman said, looking around cautiously. But they're not easy to get to. They operate in the shadows, and getting to them won't be simple. But if we can do it, we'll finally have the answers we've been searching for. Emily nodded, her mind made up. She wasn't going to let anything stop her now. She had already crossed the line, and there was no going back. Where do we start? Emily asked, her voice steady. The woman smiled faintly. We start by finding someone who knows more than they're letting on. Someone who can give us the next piece of the puzzle. Emily felt a surge of hope, mixed with the heavy weight of uncertainty. She had no idea what she was walking into, but one thing was certain. She was going to find her father, no matter what it took. The woman handed Emily a phone, her fingers brushing against hers for a brief moment. Take this, she said. Use it to reach me when you're ready. I'll help you, but you need to be careful. Helios doesn't take kindly to people asking questions. Emily took the phone, tucking it into her bag. Thank you, she said softly. I won't let you down. The woman nodded, her face a mask of determination. Good. Now go. Time is running out. Emily stepped out of the office and into the cold night air, the weight of what she had just learned still settling in her chest. The road ahead was dangerous, but she was ready. She had no choice. She was going to find her father, and she wasn't going to stop until she had the answers. The truth was out there, and Emily was going to uncover it, no matter the cost. Emily's fingers trembled as she held the phone the woman had given her. It felt too heavy, like a piece of something dangerous, but she couldn't afford to hesitate now. The next step in her search for answers was clear. Find the contact who could give her the truth. She had no idea who this person was or what they would tell her, but Emily knew she had no choice. She stepped out into the street, her mind racing. She had learned so much already, and yet the questions were multiplying. What kind of operation had her father gotten involved in? What had he seen that made him want out? And who were the people behind Helios International that would go so far to erase him? She needed to find her father, but she was starting to realize that the road to the truth would be much more complicated and far more dangerous than she ever anticipated. As she walked down the busy street of Manhattan, the weight of the situation pressed on her. She looked around, the city bustling with people going about their daily lives, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. She glanced at the phone again, taking a deep breath before dialing the number the woman had given her. The phone rang twice before a voice on the other end picked up. Who is this? The voice was sharp, commanding. This is Emily. I was told to reach out to you, she said, trying to steady her voice. There was a long pause before the voice on the other end responded. You shouldn't have called me. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Emily's heart skipped a beat. I don't care. I need answers. I need to know what happened to my father. Where is he? The voice softened slightly, but there was still an edge to it. You're digging into things that have been buried for a reason. Your father, he was tangled up in something far bigger than you realize. Helios wasn't just an investment firm. They were involved in covert operations all over the world. Your father knew too much, and that's why he's gone. You need to stop looking for him. Emily's breath caught in her throat. No, she said firmly. I'm not stopping. I don't care what they did to him. I need to find him. He's my father. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone, and Emily could hear the person on the other end considering her words. Finally, they spoke. You don't get it, do you? If you keep pushing, if you keep asking questions, you'll end up like your father. They won't just erase you, Emily. They'll make sure you never even existed. Emily felt a chill run down her spine, but she stood her ground. I'm not afraid of them. The voice chuckled darkly. You will be. But if you really want to find your father, then you're going to have to meet me. There's a place, a safe house, where you can learn more. But you need to understand, once you're in, there's no going back. Emily's pulse quickened. Where? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I'll send you the address. You'll need to come alone. The phone clicked off before Emily could say another word. She stood there for a moment, staring at the screen, her heart pounding. She was scared. Of course, she was scared. But more than that, she was determined. She wasn't going to back down. This was it. The next step. The woman had warned her about how dangerous this was, but Emily didn't care. She had to know the truth. She had to find her father. The thought of walking into a dangerous situation didn't even faze her. What could be worse than the fear of never knowing what had happened to him? She glanced at the address on her phone and began to walk. The place was tucked away in a quieter part of the city, far from the bright lights and bustling crowds of Manhattan. The streets grew darker as she approached, the buildings smaller and more dilapidated. She wasn't sure what she expected, but it wasn't this. This place felt wrong, as though it had been forgotten by time. Emily stood in front of a nondescript building, the kind that blended in with the rest of the city's forgotten corners. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell of damp wood and stale air hit her immediately. The room was dark, the only light coming from a flickering lamp in the corner. "You came," the voice from the phone said, emerging from the shadows. Emily could barely make out the figure of a man standing near the far wall, his face hidden by the low light. "I'm here," Emily said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. "Tell me what you know." The man stepped forward, his face now visible in the dim light. He was older than she had expected, his features worn with years of experience in the shadows. "You really don't understand what you're getting yourself into, do you?" he asked, his voice rough. Emily didn't flinch. "I'm here for one reason, to find my father." "Tell me what happened." The man studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll tell you everything. But once you know, you won't be able to walk away. You'll be in this just as deep as he was. And there's no going back." Emily took a deep breath, nodding. "I understand. Your father was involved with a lot of people who don't want to be found. Helios wasn't just an investment firm. It was a front for something much darker. They were involved in arms deals, black market operations, and funding groups that no one should be backing. But your father, he was special. He knew too much, and that's why he disappeared." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean, special?" The man's eyes flickered with something. Anger, maybe regret. He had access to information that could bring it all down, and that's why they had to get rid of him. Emily's mind was spinning. She had always known her father had secrets, but this was more than she could ever have imagined. "Where is he now?" she demanded, her voice shaking with urgency. The man shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but I know the people who do, and I know how dangerous they are. If you want to find him, you'll have to go to them. But be prepared. They don't take kindly to outsiders." Emily nodded, a determined fire in her eyes. "I don't care. I'll do whatever it takes." The man sighed, as if he had hoped she would back down, but Emily was resolute. "Then you'd better be ready for what's coming next," he said quietly, handing her a file. "This is your next step." She took it without hesitation. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She wasn't turning back now. The search for her father had just taken a darker turn, and Emily was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Emily stared at the file in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly as she flipped through the pages. The man who had given her the file, the one who had warned her about the dangerous people behind her father's disappearance, had disappeared as quickly as he had appeared. The only thing left now was the trail he had given her, a trail that led her further into the darkness. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she would take the next step toward finding her father. But with every turn of the page, she couldn't shake the feeling that the closer she got, the more dangerous it became. The file was filled with names, addresses, and coded messages, but one thing stood out: a location. A remote compound, located on the outskirts of the city, where the people involved with Helios International had been conducting their operations. Emily's heart raced as she looked at the coordinates. This was it. This was where she would find the answers she had been searching for. She had no idea what she would find there, but she couldn't back down now. Her father's disappearance had already cost her too much, and she wasn't going to stop until she uncovered the truth. With the file tucked securely in her bag, Emily made her way to the compound. The streets seemed quieter as she drove further out of the city, the buildings growing smaller and more dilapidated as the urban sprawl began to fade into the distance. She followed the directions, her mind focused on the task at hand, but every now and then, she would glance nervously at the rearview mirror, half expecting someone to be following her. When she finally arrived, the compound loomed in front of her, an imposing, abandoned-looking building surrounded by high fences and security cameras. It looked deserted, but Emily knew better. The people who had been operating here were never really gone. She parked her car in the shadow of a nearby building and surveyed the area. The compound was silent, almost eerily so. There were no guards visible, no movement from the windows. But Emily knew this was all part of the game. They were watching her, just as they had watched her father. She approached the entrance slowly, her breath steady despite the rising tension in her chest. The file had mentioned a hidden entrance, one that would give her access to the heart of the operation without alerting the people inside. She had no idea who she was up against, but she was ready. She had to be. The hidden entrance was tucked behind a rusted gate, barely visible from the main road. Emily took a deep breath and slipped through, feeling the cold metal of the gate against her skin as she pushed it open. Once inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air was thick with secrecy, the kind of tension that only came from being surrounded by people who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. She moved quickly but carefully, her footsteps muffled by the overgrown grass beneath her feet. The building ahead was dark, with only a faint glow of light coming from the cracks around the edges of the door. Emily had no idea what she was walking into, but she couldn't afford to hesitate now. She was close to the truth, closer than she had ever been. She reached the door, her pulse quickening. She hadn't seen anyone inside yet, but she knew that didn't mean the place was empty. There were always eyes watching, always someone waiting for the right moment to make their move. She reached for the door handle, but before she could turn it, a voice spoke from the shadows. "You shouldn't be here." Emily froze, her heart skipping a beat. She turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat. A figure stepped out from the darkness, tall and imposing, his face hidden in the shadows. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "It's not just your father you're looking for," he said quietly, his voice low and controlled. "It's everything he was involved in." Emily's mind raced. This man knew more than she did. "What do you know about him?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man's lips curled into a faint smile, though his eyes remained cold. "I know that he was part of something much bigger than you realize. And now, so are you." Emily's stomach tightened. She had suspected as much, but hearing it out loud made it all feel too real. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, trying to steady her nerves. The man stepped even closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't want anything from you. But if you're looking for your father, you'll have to work with me. The people who took him are not who you think they are. And they'll come after you, just like they did him." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean, they'll come after me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man's eyes locked onto hers. "They're already watching. But if you want to find your father, you have no choice but to trust me. We both want the same thing. We just have to be smart about it." Emily swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. She didn't have a choice. If she wanted to find her father, she would have to trust this man. But every instinct in her told her to be careful. She had no idea who he was or what he really wanted. "All right," she said finally, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "I'll work with you. But if you're lying to me, I'll find out." The man nodded, a glint of something dangerous in his eyes. "I don't lie," he said quietly. "And neither do you." Emily didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She was getting closer to the truth. And there was no turning back now. The man's presence was suffocating, his silence pressing down on Emily as they stood there in the dimly lit room. She had agreed to trust him, but with each passing second, her wariness grew. Who was this man, and what did he want from her? They were standing on the precipice of something huge, and Emily had no idea what lay beyond it. "So what now?" she asked, her voice steady but her mind racing. The man took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "Now, we get you closer to the heart of this," he said, his tone low, almost conspiratorial. "The people who took your father, Helios, and the others, they're not just hiding in the shadows. They're operating right under our noses. And they have more power than you can imagine." Emily felt a chill at his words, but she didn't back down. "How do you know all this?" she demanded. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes scanning the room as if ensuring they weren't being overheard. "Because I've been part of it," he said quietly, almost too quietly. "I was once like your father, part of the system, and I made it out. Barely." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "You were involved with them?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded, his face hardening. "Yes, but I walked away. And when I did, they made sure to let me know it wasn't going to be easy. They never forget. And they never forgive." Emily took a step back, trying to process what he had just revealed. So, you know how they operate? You know how to find them? The man paused, his gaze softening for just a moment. I know enough to get you in the door. But from there, it's on you. Emily swallowed hard. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever this man was about to throw her way, but she had no choice. She had already committed to this path, and there was no turning back now. All right, I'm ready, she said firmly, though inside she was anything but. The man nodded and turned, leading her through a back door into a narrow hallway. We have to be quick. There are people watching. They know we're coming. They'll be expecting us. Emily followed him, her pulse quickening with every step. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, and the further they walked, the more intense the sense of danger became. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was always watching her. They arrived at a door at the end of the hallway, and the man stopped, turning to face her. This is it, he said, his voice low. Once we go in, we can't go back. Are you ready? Emily nodded, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure what was behind that door, but she knew it was the only way to get closer to the truth. The man reached for the door handle and turned it slowly. As the door creaked open, Emily's breath caught in her throat. Inside was a small, dimly lit room, with a large desk and several computers lined up along the walls. It looked like some kind of control center, though it was barely functional. The man stepped inside first, and Emily followed, her eyes scanning the room for anything unusual. This is where it all happens, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of years spent in the shadows. This is where Helios and their people make their moves. They're connected to everything: government officials, military contracts, illegal arms deals. This is the nerve center. Emily's eyes widened as she took in the sight. She had no idea what she was about to uncover, but it felt like she was standing on the edge of a massive conspiracy, one that reached far beyond her father's disappearance. How do we find what we need? She asked, her voice steady despite the rising fear in her chest. The man walked over to one of the computers and began typing rapidly. We access their files. We go through their transactions, their communications. Everything. It's all here. Your father had access to these files, and now you do too. Emily stepped closer, her eyes glued to the screen as the man pulled up a list of encrypted files. These are the files they thought were safe, he said, his fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard. But nothing is ever truly safe. We'll crack them open, and when we do, you'll see everything. Who your father was really working with, what he was involved in. It'll all be there. Emily watched as the man began decrypting one of the files. Her heart raced, each second feeling like an eternity. The room was silent except for the clicking of keys and the hum of the computer. And then, the screen flickered, and a file opened. It was a document, dated years ago, detailing a series of illegal transactions. But it wasn't just any transaction. This one was signed by her father. Emily's hands shook as she read the document. It was worse than she had imagined. The file outlined a series of payments, large sums of money funneled through various shell companies, all tied to Helios and their covert operations. Her father had been involved in smuggling, arms deals, and more. He had been working with people she never would have believed. This is it, Emily whispered, her voice shaky. This is what he was doing. The man stood silently behind her, his expression unreadable. Your father wasn't just caught in the middle of something, he said softly. He was a key player. And now, you've seen it for yourself. Emily felt a lump form in her throat as she processed what she had just uncovered. Her father had been involved in something that not only destroyed him, but had also put her life in danger. What do we do now? She asked, turning to face the man. He gave her a hard look. Now, we find out who's really behind it. We take this to the people who can do something about it. But remember, once we expose them, there's no going back. Emily nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. She had finally found the truth, but now, the real challenge was just beginning. She was in this too deep now, and she wasn't about to let go. She had come this far for her father, and for herself. And she wasn't going to stop until she had answers. Emily's hands shook as she stood in front of the computer screen, the weight of the document she had just uncovered still heavy in her mind. Her father had been involved in far more than she could have ever imagined. The smuggling, the arms deals, the hidden accounts. It was all right in front of her, in black and white. It was worse than anything she had ever feared. The man stood behind her, watching quietly as she absorbed the information. "You see now," he said quietly, his voice tinged with a somber understanding. "Your father wasn't just a victim. He was a key player in this web, one of the people making these things happen." Emily didn't know how to respond. The truth had come crashing down on her, and the realization was almost too much to bear. Her father, someone she had always thought of as distant, even absent, but not dangerous, had been deeply involved with people who were capable of anything. He had been part of a machine, a system built on corruption, violence, and lies. And now, that system was coming after her. She turned away from the screen, running a hand through her hair as she tried to process everything. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man didn't hesitate. "We take this information to the right people. We can expose them, finally. This is the proof that they've been hiding. The connections, the payments, the manipulation. It's all right here." Emily nodded slowly, but doubt gnawed at her. "And what happens after we expose them?" The man's expression hardened, his jaw tight. "That's the question. These people don't go down easily. If we expose them, they'll come after us. They'll do whatever it takes to protect their secrets." Emily felt a cold knot in her stomach. She knew what he was saying was true. She had seen the lengths people like this would go to in order to stay hidden. Her father had paid the price for trying to escape their grip. Now, she was walking the same dangerous path. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, trying to steady her racing heart. "We get to the head of the snake," the man said. "Helios has people everywhere, but they answer to one person. If we get to him, we can shut the whole thing down. But getting to him won't be easy." Emily's mind raced. She had no idea how deep this went or who this person was, but she had come too far to back out now. Her father's fate, and her own, hung in the balance. "How do we get to him?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear building inside her. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a small, black notebook. "We'll need this," he said, handing it to her. "This is a list of names. People who are connected to Helios. Some are on the inside, some are on the outside, but they all know how to find the person we're looking for." Emily took the notebook, her hands still trembling. She flipped it open and scanned the names, but they meant nothing to her. "Who are these people?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Some of them were your father's contacts," the man explained. "Others are just people who can point us in the right direction. But we need to be careful. One wrong move, and this whole thing could collapse." Emily closed the notebook, feeling the weight of the task ahead of her. She had no choice but to trust the man, but her mind was filled with questions. Was this really the right thing to do? Would exposing Helios bring her the answers she needed, or would it only lead to more danger? She didn't know, but she had to try. She had to find her father. "What's our first move?" she asked, her voice firm. The man looked at her for a long moment, as if measuring her resolve. "First, we make contact with one of these people," he said, pointing to a name in the notebook. "We find out where the head of Helios is hiding. Then, we go after him. But you need to understand, this won't be easy. These people will stop at nothing to protect themselves. And if they know we're coming, they'll disappear before we can get to them." Emily took a deep breath. "I don't care. I'll do whatever it takes." The man nodded. "Good. Then we get started." They moved quickly, leaving the room and heading out into the night. The air outside was cold, and the streets were quieter than usual. Emily could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Every step she took brought her closer to the truth, to the answers she needed, and to the man who had disappeared from her life all those years ago. The woman's warning echoed in her mind. Once you're involved, there's no turning back. But Emily wasn't afraid. She had already made her choice. She would find her father, no matter what it took. She would bring the truth to light, even if it meant risking everything. The man led her through the streets, his pace quick and purposeful. They reached a small, unmarked building tucked between two larger buildings. The man stopped in front of it, glancing around before turning to Emily. "This is it," he said. "We're going in. Be ready for anything." Emily nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what to expect on the other side of that door, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to stop until she had the answers she was looking for. The man led Emily through the narrow corridor of the building, his footsteps echoing softly in the dim light. The air felt thick with tension as they reached a door at the end of the hall. Emily's heart raced in her chest, each beat louder than the last. This was the moment she had been waiting for. This was where everything could change, where she could finally uncover the truth about her father. The man stopped in front of the door, glancing over his shoulder at her. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Emily nodded without hesitation. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. "I'm ready," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He pushed open the door, revealing a small, sparse room with a single desk, a couple of chairs, and a laptop sitting on the desk. The room was quiet, too quiet, and the faint hum of the city outside seemed like a distant memory. It was clear that they weren't supposed to be here. Emily's eyes immediately went to the laptop. She could sense that this was where everything would be revealed. The man walked over to the desk and sat down, motioning for Emily to sit in the chair across from him. "This is it," he said, his voice serious. "This is where we find the final piece of the puzzle." Emily took a seat, her palms sweaty as she tried to steady her breathing. The man opened the laptop and began typing quickly, his fingers moving over the keys with practiced precision. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of encrypted files. Emily leaned forward, her eyes locked on the screen. "What are we looking for?" she asked, her voice tight with anticipation. "Everything," he replied, not looking up from the laptop. "We need to get into their most secure files, the ones they thought were hidden." He typed a few more commands, and the screen shifted to reveal a list of names. Names that sent a shiver down Emily's spine. These were the people who had been connected to Helios, the ones who had helped build the empire her father had been part of. But there was something even more unsettling. Her father's name appeared on the list, right next to the names of some of the most dangerous people in the world. Emily's stomach turned. "What is this?" she whispered. "Why is his name here?" The man glanced up, his expression grim. "Your father was more than just an employee for them. He was a key player. He helped them build their operations from the ground up." Emily's breath caught in her throat. What does that mean? What was he really doing? The man paused for a moment, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. It means he was part of the plan. He wasn't just facilitating business deals or investments. He was involved in every part of it. The arms deals, the illegal contracts, the corruption. He was making it all happen. Emily's mind spun. She had always known her father was distant, but this was something else entirely. He had been a part of something dark and dangerous, something that had destroyed him and could now destroy her too. "I don't believe it," Emily said, shaking her head. "This can't be true. He was a good man." The man leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on her. "No one gets involved in this kind of operation unless they want to. Your father made choices that led him down this path. And now, the people who control this, they'll do anything to keep their secrets hidden." Emily's pulse quickened. She felt trapped, as though the walls were closing in around her. The answers she had been looking for were only leading to more questions, more danger. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man closed the laptop with a snap, locking it in place. "Now, we take what we've found to the people who can help us. We expose them, and we take them down. But there's a price for that. There's always a price." Emily's head spun. "But how do we expose them? These people have the power to make anyone disappear." The man's gaze hardened. "That's where you come in. You have something they don't, your father's connection to them. They'll never expect you to be the one to take them down. You're the key to their downfall." Emily's mind raced. She had never thought of herself as a hero, never thought she could be the one to bring down a criminal empire. But now, it seemed like the only option. She had to do this. For her father. For herself. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "But I know I can't walk away now." The man nodded, his expression softening just a fraction. "You don't have to do it alone. I'll help you. But you need to understand, the closer we get, the more dangerous it becomes. They won't stop until you're gone." Emily looked at the man, determination burning in her eyes. "Then I'll make sure they don't get the chance." He stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "Then let's finish this." The man grabbed the laptop, slipped it into a bag, and motioned for Emily to follow. "We don't have much time. Let's move." As Emily followed him out of the room, she couldn't help but feel like she had crossed some invisible line. There was no going back now. They were in this together, and they were going to expose the truth, no matter what it cost. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. She would stop at nothing to find her father and take down the people who had destroyed him. The fight was just beginning, and Emily was ready. The silence was suffocating as Emily followed the man through the narrow alleyways, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of everything that had led her here, the uncovering of her father's involvement, the people who were after him, and now, the dangerous path ahead. But she wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when she was this close. The man led her to a dimly lit building on the outskirts of the city. The area was quiet, too quiet, and the air felt heavy with tension. Emily knew that whatever she was about to uncover inside, it would change everything. They stopped in front of a door marked with a faded number. The man turned to her, his face set in stone. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "Once we go in, there's no turning back." Emily nodded, her throat tight. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming next, but she couldn't stop now. This was the only way forward. He pushed the door open, and Emily followed him inside. The room was small, filled with dim light and the faint hum of old equipment. She couldn't help but notice the stacks of files, the computers, and the old monitors. It looked like an office from a forgotten time, and she felt an uneasy sense of foreboding settle over her. The man walked to the desk at the far side of the room and began sifting through a pile of papers. "This is where we find the final piece," he said, his voice quiet but intense. Emily stepped forward, trying to steady her nerves as she approached the desk. She watched as the man pulled a file from the pile and handed it to her. The weight of it felt heavy in her hands, as though it contained the answers she had been seeking for so long. She opened it slowly, scanning the contents. What she saw made her blood run cold. Inside was a detailed account of the operations her father had been involved in. Arms deals, illegal transactions, covert operations, things that no one outside of this world should have known. But it was worse than just that. There, in the middle of the file, was a name she hadn't expected to see. Her own. Emily's eyes widened as she stared at the name, written in black ink, connected to the very operations that had taken her father. She felt like the room was spinning. "What is this?" she asked, her voice shaking. The man looked at her, his expression unreadable. "They knew about you, Emily. They always have. And now they know you're digging. That's why we need to act fast." Her heart raced as the weight of his words settled in. "What do you mean, they knew about me?" she asked, struggling to catch her breath. The man stepped closer, his face hardening. "Helios. The people who've been controlling everything, your father's involvement, the money laundering, the arms deals, they've known about you from the start. They'll stop at nothing to protect themselves. And now, they'll come after you, just like they did your father." Emily felt the cold realization sink in. She had been so focused on finding her father that she hadn't realized just how deep this had gone. The people behind Helios weren't just dangerous, they were relentless. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, sliding it across the desk toward her. "This is a tracker," he explained. "It will help us locate the people who know where your father is. We just need to get close enough to tap into their network." Emily took the device, her hands still trembling. "And how do we get close enough?" she asked, feeling the weight of the situation closing in on her. The man gave her a sharp look. "We have to infiltrate their operation. We find their weakest point, get inside, and find out where your father is being kept. It's the only way." Emily nodded, her mind spinning with the gravity of it all. She had always known her father was connected to something dark, but this was a whole different level. The people behind Helios weren't just criminals. They were a well-oiled machine, moving in the shadows, untouchable. "How long do we have?" Emily asked, her voice strained. The man's expression darkened. "Not long. If they know we're onto them, they'll disappear before we have a chance to act. We have to move quickly." Emily's thoughts raced as she tried to process everything. She had to find her father. She had to bring down the people responsible for everything that had happened. But she also knew that doing so would come at a cost. These people weren't just going to give up. They would fight back, and they would do whatever it took to protect their secrets. "All right," Emily said, her voice steady, despite the fear that gripped her. "Let's do this." The man nodded and stood up, his face hardening with resolve. "This is it. We go in, we get the information, and we take them down. If we succeed, we end this. If we fail, well, we won't fail." Emily stood up, her heart pounding in her chest, and followed him out of the room. They moved quickly, knowing the clock was ticking. As they walked down the hallway, Emily felt the weight of the decision she had made. She was about to step into a world she couldn't fully comprehend, but there was no turning back now. She had already committed. She had already crossed the line. And no matter what it cost her, she was going to find her father and expose the people who had ruined everything. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. Emily's heart pounded as they entered the dimly lit room, the final destination of their long and dangerous journey. The air was thick with tension, and every step she took felt like it could be her last. The man, who had guided her this far, moved ahead with purpose, his face set in grim determination. Emily followed, her mind racing. They had come too far to turn back now. The truth was within reach, but she had no idea what she would find when they finally confronted the people responsible for everything that had happened to her father. As they approached the center of the room, Emily could see a single figure sitting at a desk, back turned toward them. He was surrounded by monitors and papers, a man who seemed completely unaware of their presence. The man who had led Emily here stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. "It's time," he said, his tone cold. The figure at the desk turned slowly, his face finally coming into view. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The man sitting before them was someone she had seen before, someone she never thought she would see again. "You," she whispered, recognition flooding through her. The man who had once been her father's mentor, the one who had introduced him to the dangerous world of Helios International, was sitting before her. He was older now, his features harder, more weathered, but the familiar gleam in his eyes remained. "Emily," he said, his voice smooth, almost pleasant. "I see you've come to finish what your father started." Emily felt a surge of anger rise within her. "What happened to him?" she demanded, stepping forward. "Where is he?" The man's lips curled into a smirk. "Your father was never meant to leave this world. He knew too much, and when he tried to escape, they made sure he couldn't. But you," he said, eyeing her carefully, "you're different. You've got your father's determination, that's for sure." Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She couldn't let his words shake her. "Where is he?" she repeated, her voice more forceful this time. The man leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. "Your father's fate was sealed the moment he got involved. He tried to cut ties with us, but you can't just walk away from Helios. No one ever can. But don't worry, Emily. Your father's sacrifice wasn't in vain. Everything he worked for is still going strong." Emily's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white. "You're lying," she spat. "You think I'm going to just sit here and listen to you justify all of this?" The man's expression hardened, but his smirk remained. "What are you going to do about it, Emily? You think you can stop this? You think you're going to take us down? You're just a girl, trying to play in a world you don't understand." Emily's breath quickened. She had heard this before. People dismissing her, thinking she was just a naive girl chasing after shadows. But she wasn't that girl anymore. "I'm not just a girl," she said, her voice steady. "And I'm not stopping until I find the truth. Until I expose everything you've done." The man stood up slowly, his face a mask of cold indifference. "You think you can stop an empire?" he asked, his voice tinged with amusement. "Helios is bigger than your father ever was. Bigger than you could ever imagine. You're just a pawn in this game, Emily. And when this is over, you'll be nothing but a memory." Emily's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of the words, the threat behind them. But she wasn't backing down. She had already lost so much. She wasn't going to lose herself. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, stepping closer. "You and your empire are nothing compared to the truth I'm about to expose." The man's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, a flicker of something, fear, maybe, or respect, passed through them. He took a step toward her. "You really think you can walk away from this, Emily? You think you can just destroy everything we've built?" Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. She could see the cracks in his confidence, the hint of doubt creeping in. "You're too late," the man said, his voice colder now. "We already have people watching you. Watching every move you make. If you think you can just waltz in here and expose us, you're gravely mistaken." Emily's heart raced as the man reached for a drawer in his desk, pulling out a small, sleek device. She didn't know what it was, but she knew it wasn't good. The man smiled, clearly enjoying her fear. "This will be the end of your little crusade, Emily," he said, pressing a button on the device. For a split second, everything felt still, as if time had frozen. Then, there was a noise, faint at first, but growing louder. A low hum, followed by a series of clicks and beeps. Emily's eyes darted around the room, trying to figure out what was happening. The man's smile widened. Do you feel that? We've already locked everything down. No one is going to help you now. You're trapped. Fear surged through Emily's veins, but she refused to let it take over. She took a deep breath, her mind working furiously. She wasn't going to be trapped. Not like this. You're wrong, she said, her voice steady despite the panic threatening to break through. This isn't over. I'm just getting started. She turned to the man, her eyes meeting his. And I'll bring you down. For the first time, the man's smirk faltered, and in that moment, Emily knew she had won. He had underestimated her, and that would be his downfall. She wasn't going to stop. She was going to find her father, and she was going to take down the people who had destroyed him and everything else they had built, with or without their approval. In this gripping tale of mystery, suspense, and discovery, Emily embarks on a thrilling journey that unveils hidden secrets and dangerous truths. As she delves deeper into the unknown, she uncovers connections to a shadowy world her father was entangled in. And the more she learns, the more she realizes that her search for answers could cost her everything. This story is full of intense moments, twists, and revelations, making it one of the most captivating, touching stories you'll ever experience. Throughout this emotional journey, Emily faces constant challenges and encounters people who reveal shocking secrets, leaving her to question the very foundation of everything she once knew. The gripping narrative uncovers the lengths one will go to for family and the truth, offering some of the most powerful, touching stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. As Emily's story unfolds, you'll witness her struggle to find her father and take down those responsible for destroying him. The touching stories in this narrative highlight the bond of family, the pursuit of justice, and the bravery required to face overwhelming odds. The tension builds as Emily fights to uncover the truth, making these touching stories a true testament to courage, resilience, and hope. As the plot thickens, the stakes grow higher, and Emily realizes that the world she's stepping into is more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Touching stories of love, loss, and vengeance intertwine, keeping you hooked with every turn of the page.